All right, here we are. Hello, everyone. It's nice to be here with all of you tonight. My name is Marco Demutis. I'm digital curator at Fotomuseum Winterthur, a photography museum in Switzerland. I'd like to thank Georg Bach for inviting me here tonight and all the staff at the Biennale, especially Dan, who helped us with all the technicality. So I'm excited to be moderating a short panel tonight. We're going to try to think of photography in a slightly different light and engaging with image practices that question the role of the photographer, the camera, and ultimately the image. So our current conditions seem to be one where photography is ubiquitous, to paraphrase Trevor Paglen, yet its processes are largely invisible. And many artists and photographers are turning to these black boxes, opening them up, and revealing the processes of computational imaging systems, from machine learning algorithms to CGI, from generative art to object detection tracking codes. Yet the interest for an approach that looks away from the representational layers, focusing on the process of the photographic capture, is something that dates back to pre-digital photography, to movements like generative photography and concrete photography in the 70s, where artists like Gottfried Jäger, among others, started exploring rule-based system of playing with the apparatus and experimenting with its properties. Tonight, we're going to try and look at this trajectory that connects ideas from generative photography to contemporary artistic explorations of the algorithmic and network properties of the image. To do this, we are very lucky to have two fantastic artists from the Darktaxa Project collective, Michael Reich and Anna Riedler, and Stefan Kroner, curator of photography and new media at Sprengel Museum in Hanover in Germany. So I'd like to start with Stefan now and ask him to talk a little bit about the movement of generative photography and the works of Gottfried Jäger. As I mentioned, Stefan is curator of photography and new media at Sprengel Museum Hanover. He's also a lecturer in art history at the Braunschweig University of Art. He's the author of Jeff Wall's Specific Pictures, the Dusseldorf School of Photography, and co-editor of Gerhard Richter editions 1965 to 2013. Since 2017, Kroner is running a blog on photo theory, photo-kunst-theorie.de, and he's working on a big survey of North American photography of the 21st century for 2021, and a retrospective of Gottfried Jäger in 2022. So thank you, Stefan, for being here with us tonight. And please, the screen is yours. Oh, I think you're muted.
Yeah, thank you, Marco. So as you heard, I'm the only one who is not an artist taking part in the discussion here. I'm just the advocate of an artist. So, and as an art historian, let me start with the history of German photography. So after World War II, we had a break, and there were three serious drives to follow and to restart after modernism, to continue this experience of modernism again after Second World War. This is first of all Otto Steinert with his subjective photography, then Bernd and Tilla Becher, famous for their documentary photography and their photo school in Düsseldorf, and not at least Gottfried Jäger. And Gottfried is born in 1937 in East Germany and moved to the West, settled down in Bielefeld, and founded a so-called Bielefeld School. He is actually becoming more and more prominent, or let me say famous. It's a kind of rediscovery of generative photography, which is presented by him. I'm just showing you three books. Here, first of all, it's a group exhibition which was made by Tate in London, 2018. And so next slide, please. Another new book. Yeah, it's from Franziska Kunze. It's a young German photo curator, actually guiding the photo department of Neue Pinakothek in Munich. And the next slide, please. This is a recently published book of Katrin Schöneck, actually curator at CO Berlin, who made her dissertation on abstract photography. And so next book is from the artist himself. Gottfried Jäger is not just an artist, but also a very eloquent and intelligent author on his own work and on photo history. So I could really recommend his collected writings, which are published 3 years ago, I think. So let me start maybe with a quote of this Tate catalog, which I found this morning, and which is really interesting for the next participants of this our discussion. The quote is on page 141, and it's the ideas proposed by artists associated with generative photography could be seen as a precursor to digitally generated imagery. So this is, I guess, a topic which Michael and Anne will follow right after me. So, but what does it really mean, generative photography? It's a term which Gottfried Jäger has coined in '68 on the at an exhibition he has held with some friends of him, Kilian Breyer, Pierre Cordier, and Hein Gravenhorst. And yeah, it's first of all a coined term which is different from documentary photography or subjective photography. But what does it really mean? So generative photography is affiliated with the aesthetics of Max Spencer, an important philosopher at that time, in the 60s. And he is both enthusiastic about technology and at the same time skeptical towards the reproductive sides of photography. That means that you can show the next slide, please. That generative photography, you see here Gottfried Jäger with 2 photos of him. Gottfried Jäger is very much concerned about productive, concrete, or let me say it, abstract photography. For this, he is using all the technical tools of the medium, and his work is very systematic. So to show you that, I'm starting with the next slide, which reveals that he was very early in the 60s. Here a photo from '65, a unique one, with color photography, which was at that time not that common. And the next slide, please, from '66. It shows it is one work of a series of works which is concerned about structural events which are visual. Next slide, please. 1 year later, it's 67. It's one of his famous Lochblendenstrukturen. And if I had other slides of this, which is not the fact, I could show you that he's working very systematically and varying all the time the same model. So next slide, please. It's from '81, and it's showing you again a colorful structure and also one example of a serial variation of a structure which is based on color. Next slide, please, is from '99, and this is this shows you that he's putting a focus on material structures of photography. It's a folded piece of photo paper, and he's also varying this kind of photos a lot. And so the last slide I'd like to show you is from 2003, and this is generated by digital tools, but you see that it's really linked with his earlier so-called analog works he is producing since years. So as I told you, he's born 37. That means he's a bit older than me. He's still working, and he's very much interested in digital works that he is producing, but which is also produced by other artists as Anne and Michael, and I'm sure that they will continue this line, which is taken by Gottfried. So this is my short statement on his work.
Thank you so much, Stefan. That was great, and I think also a fantastic line that you started drawing, where we can now continue and jump back to the present with Michael and Anna. So Michael is first going to talk a little bit about the whole Darktaxa project. So Michael Reich was born in 1964. He studied at Rietveld Academy in Amsterdam and Kunstakademie in Düsseldorf. Currently, he's teaching as a professor for photography and digital media at Allianz Hochschule in Bonn-Alter, Germany. He has won several prizes and grants, and his work has been exhibited widely internationally. His works are part of collections worldwide at, amongst others, Kunstmuseum Bonn, Museum Kurshaus, LACMA Los Angeles, Fotomuseum Winterthur, National Galleries in Edinburgh, and others. He's the initiators and of international artist group Darktaxa Project, and currently lives and works in Düsseldorf in Germany. Thanks, Michael. The screen is now yours, please.
Hello, everybody. I'm gonna share my screen now and show you some works of the Darktaxa group. All right. So Darktaxa Project, as the name says, began as a project, has some roots in 2015, but was actually, first of all, an exhibition project in 2019, so it's not so very old at this point. Second. All right. It developed very quickly into an international artist group with momentarily 17 artists. I show you here like some screenshots from the website. Here are the participants. So it's younger artists, more established artists, and you can see it's Berlin, Düsseldorf, London, New York, very international. Here's some internet links. I put them in the chat already. Yes, I want to show you not all 17, but maybe a selection so you can have a good impression. So what we do at, or what most artists do at Darktaxa, we work on the edge of photography and digital imaging. So this is a field that is very much in discussion, not at all defined at this point theoretically, and there's a lot of technical and artistic development and artistic reactions to this development. So this is kind of the environment this is kind of the setting where we work in. Darktaxa is mostly, I mean, just one sentence maybe, it's experimental, mostly conceptual. So with our works, I need to say one or two sentences in order to understand the works. So we use digital image editing, CGI, photogrammetry, motion capture, scanography, 3D scanning, augmented reality, AI, and GANs. Anna Riddler is gonna tell you all about it later. 3D printing, all kinds of software. So we call these the new digital tools. And here but most of the times it's hybrid methods. So it's not only software, but it's also 3D printing. So it's combined and very complex processes. So here's a younger artist. He's based in Frankfurt, Rafael Bronk. And I chose him because, well, he's taking photographs, screenshots maybe, in computer games. But it's not like an in-game photography that some of the people watching us are probably familiar with, but he programmed a hacking tool that allows him to leave the ego perspective of the avatar and go to corners or environments surrounding in these computer games that are normally not accessible for the user. I took this as an entrance because here something happens that that most of us are interested in, to kind of reveal something about the digital tools or the digital environments that we all live in and that we are engaged with. So it's not only playing around, making beautiful pictures. That's part of the deal. So there's a lot of fun and passion involved, of course, but there's also a critical approach. What do these media, what do these tools do? How are they embedded in a larger digital environment and in our society? This is work by Björn Sieber. Björn is a photographer and artist from Leipzig. So what you see here is basically analog photography taken with a large format camera and on film. So very retro in this sense. But at the same time, this his works only function because of the digital conditions we're living in. Because what he does is he is looking for pictures on Facebook that are on diverse platform, amateur pictures, JPEGs, and he restages them and remakes them in Leipzig with cast models, with theater prop makers. So it's a very complex process. So it's actually like a material reenacting these found and anonymous JPEG pictures, and then he photographs them again. So this is a way of dealing with the the flood of images after Google, in my eyes. A question about authorship under digital conditions, and more like that. This is a work by artist duo Banz and Bowinkel. They use basically two main processes. One is motion capture, and one is CGI. So what they do is they do a kind of performance in a digital motion capture studio, which means all the movements of their body are recorded digitally, and then these recordings are transferred into a computer, and they're there as a mesh or as a digital structure, and then in a CGI, computer-generated imagery, you can choose any surface that you want for these structures. So they went for kind of fluid, almost painterly like surface, and the work, yes, for me has of course references to painting, to performance, and it's all about the body versus virtual or versus digital space topic, and this is why I choose for these. I found this really interesting and very central, the body versus virtual topic. Another artist, Aaron Scheer, he's based in Berlin, a young artist who's working with digital image editing tools. So when I look at these pictures, I see something like almost representational kind of associations, but it's very unclear. So there's something photographic, something not photographic in them. But what he's actually doing is he doesn't use, like, there's no photographic procedures involved in this. It's basically all painted by hand with digital tools, line by line. He calls, or I would call this like kind of fake digitals, because they're not done by programs or in an automatic kind of way, but done by hand. Okay, I have 1 more minute, so I show you very quickly. Maybe, oh yes, here Achim Monet, he's working with photogrammetry that he's not executing in real space, but in virtual space, in Google Earth. So he has programmed some virtual drones that fly around in Google Earth, collect data, and with the help of these data, he can build a 3D model. This is a place in Cologne, where an exhibition took place that we had, and then he prints these data as a 3D model. So actually, what you have at the end is a you can see it here on the right. It's like A3 size, a 3D printed model, and the 3D printed model is kind of a representation of the Google Earth, or kind of a photo of the Google Earth, I would say. And the Google Earth, of course, is a representation of the real physical space that we all live in. All right, maybe very quickly, Susan Morris working with motion capture. You can see her in the motion capture studio here. David Young working with AI. Johannes Post, here he's with a saw cutting laptops and 3D scanning them. Julius Brautmann working, he invented this device that you hear that makes cameras vibrate and distorts the picture. Philip Goldbach, he built a CD-ROM read-only memory. I mean, you can see all this. I do this very quickly now, but you can see all this on our webpage with text and all explanations that you ever want, I hope. Ralf Brück, working with digital editing software. Alex Krein. Beate Gütschow working with photogrammetry. Ria Pritzeröder working with 3D scanning. Arno Beck, who's using a typewriter to type photographs. This is some of my work, some 3D printed and generated 3D printed objects. And this is the lovely work of Anna Riddler. And I'm very curious what you're going to tell us now, Anna. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Michael. Just, yeah, they're too good. I know it was very hard, but we have to run on a very tight time. So let me just quickly introduce Anna before she shares with us a bit more in-depth information about her work. So Anna Riddler is an artist and researcher who works with information and data. She's born in London. Riddler spent her childhood raised between Atlanta, Georgia, and the United Kingdom. A core element of her work lies in the creation of handmade data sets through a laborious process of selecting and classifying images and text. By creating her own data sets, Riddler is able to uncover and expose underlying themes and concepts while also inverting the usual process of constructing large databases. Her interests are in drawing, machine learning, data collection, storytelling, and technology. Thank you, Anna.
Thank you. I will try and be brief. I feel very lucky having a whole 5 minutes to talk about my project, whereas all the other artists only had a short. Anyway, as Marco said, I am an artist and researcher. I'm based in London, and my practice, I feel, kind of brings together the artistic, scientific, and academic. I've exhibited in places like the Barbican and the Centre Pompidou, but I've also had papers accepted at machine learning conferences. I'm very interested in systems of knowledge and how knowledge is formed and kept. And part of this interest is unpicking new technologies and how they're created, and looking at how they reach back into history and what traces, connotations, and associations they bring. For the past 4 or 5 years, I have been looking at this through artificial intelligence, or more properly machine learning, as part of my creative practice. And I'm really interested in using it not just as a tool, but as a way of working. A large part of this is constructing the science from the ground up, from the algorithms through to the data. Because when you're working, I think, with machine learning, it's important to think of there are 2 separate strands. There's the algorithm, which constructs a world, and then there's the kind of data or data set which goes into it, which kind of forms the kind of knowledge in which it can construct the world from. This kind of way of working, this ability to do kind of like both parts of it, really allows me to understand and show error states and assumptions and reveal the kind of labor of making, whilst also inverting the usual process of such things. I think a lot of conversations around machine learning, when you kind of think of it around creativity, center on machines making art or replacing humans. And that ignores for me what is one of the fundamentally most interesting parts of this process, which is people. I think it's often underestimated the huge amount of labor and work and human decision making that is essential for making AI or machine learning work. I'm going to talk through, hopefully this will play. Yeah. Very quickly, a multi-year project that started in about 2017, where I looked at the connections between value, speculation, technologies, and artificial intelligence. To make the project, I started out by creating my own data set. As I mentioned, a data set is something that you need to have in order for an algorithm to kind of build a model. These things are usually hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions, sometimes even billions of data points. And to make my own, I think, is a way of pushing back against that usual way of doing things. I took 10,000 photographs of tulips, and this really forces me to examine each one and have a very intimate connection to the data that I'm using, rather than just anonymously scrape something from the internet. The classifications, the labels that I then gave these photographs are mine and mine alone, and I have this real connection to it. Data sets are normally kind of found as kind of zip files or downloads, but I wanted to make mine into an artwork to kind of draw attention to the process and what is in these things. This is an installation shot of the data set as an artwork. It's called Myriad Tulips, which I made in 2018. It's a 50 square meter installation of handwritten photographs installed in a nearly perfect grid. And by presenting the data set and putting it in this way, it allows people to comprehend more about what these things are than just as a mere download. The time, the effort, the labor, and the scale of it, as well as the network of decisions that I was making when I was doing this thing. It's so easy, I feel, to kind of overlook this labor that goes into making the data set. And for me, it was really important to kind of like push back against that. This is a slightly closer shot of it, and you can maybe see the handwritten labels that accompany each of the thousands of photographs, the categories that I had to apply to the photographs in order for me to kind of build the type of machine learning model that I needed to. The labels are essential to kind of have some form of control over it. And also kind of in this installation, you can kind of see the shifting of those categories, because when you're thinking about something even as simple as a single type of flower, a tulip, and trying to put it into binary categories, it actually becomes very difficult to decide whether something is red or if it's pink, if it's kind of white or pale yellow. It's very hard to decide where these boundaries lie. And you can kind of see, even in the work itself, how I was adjusting my opinions according to maybe the time of day, my mood, what I'd seen before. And I think by kind of crossing things out and showing this handwriting, again, it's very much emphasizing the role that I was playing in creating this, and also the role that people have in these, and the agency that people have in using these tools and processes. But a data set is a working object, and I used it to make a moving image piece. This is the installation shot of it. And then this, oh, I'm going to play it again. Sorry, that should have been just a video. This is a short snippet of it. It's a piece called Mosaic Virus, which brings together historical parallels between tulip mania, which is a moment in the 1630s where a price of a tulip bulb went for the same price as an Amsterdam townhouse, allegedly, and then fell to the price of a onion. It brings together the parallels between tulip mania and also cryptocurrencies, as well as artificial intelligence, because we are in the middle of a speculative bubble around AI, I think, at the moment. I wanted to update the traditional Dutch still life, but creating it using a GAN, a generative adversarial network, is producing each of the stills of the moving image piece. So it's producing these tulips, but the appearance and the shape of the tulip is controlled by the price of Bitcoin. Mosaic was the name of the virus that caused the stripes in the petal of a tulip, and the tulips with stripy petals were the most expensive during the tulip mania, and helped cause the speculation in the price. And in this piece, the more stripy a tulip is, the higher the price of Bitcoin, and it's changing over time to show how the market fluctuates. And I wanted to kind of bring all of these ideas together to show kind of like these connections between capitalism, value, and the tangible and intangible nature of speculation, and to use the medium and tool of machine learning and start to unpick some of the ways that it works to do that. And that is just very quick. I hope that was under 5 minutes presentation.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. It's my fault. I've been a terrible moderator because all of the stuff from all of you has been so very interesting. So I didn't want to cut, but that does leave us with only roughly 5 minutes for a bit of a discussion. So let's see when they kick us out. But for now, yeah, thanks again for all of these individual presentations. It seems to me that there is a shared concern in both this artistic practice and movement. And of course, we're a bit oversimplifying because even within the collective, there's so many different individual voices in Darktaxa with different concerns. And also in generative photography and the works of Jaeger, there are, of course, a certain evolution and certain ideas. But at the same time, there's also like such different image cultures between the 70s and now, as well as image technologies, right? And while we have, of course, notions of privacy and surveillance and capital that have been attached to the image, the apparatus that we are seeing now through the work that you just described is very different from the apparatus that Gottfried Jaeger was working with. So I was, yeah, maybe curious to see where we can actually define this trajectory, what kind of lineage there is. Maybe from both, I mean, from all three of your perspective, from the artistic side, if you can say a little bit how you see this movement of generative photography and how it informs your practice, to Michael and Anna. And maybe from Stefan's perspective, from a curator's point of view, how do you see the work of contemporary artists, contemporary photographers in relation to that of Jaeger? Michael and Anna, do you guys want to start? With your microphone on.
Anna, can I say something about this? I mean, Stefan said it already, but I want to kind of maybe add something to it. Historically, photography was never seen as something, or in very rare cases, seen as abstract or generative. This is a development of the last years, and there's definitely a need to look back at generative photography because it gives a possibility to our situation we're in now. The situation we're in now is, talking about photography, we don't only have a recording side of photography, but we all have the rendering and digital possibilities that digital technology brings us. So that was a huge crisis, existential crisis for photography and all the artists working with photography. so generative photography, looking back at that, kind of gives an understanding model for the generative side or the rendering side that is playing this huge role in all digital imagery, photographic approaches, photography-based strategies or tools. So I think this kind of rethinking and getting back to generative photography on one hand, and the other side, connecting this with the representational or documentary side, because when we look at our iPhone, we see representations and abstractions. So this is kind of mixing, connecting in a way, and we as artists, we really want to try to find out about this, how this is going and how this is intertwined or connected and what's going on between these two, I mean, we could talk about 2 more hours about that, but maybe this is
Anna, what do you think?
I just want to follow on because I am also like very, very fascinated at this, as Michael described, this mixing between the kind of the nonfiction and the generative. And I think for me, it's so apparent in working with kind of machine learning, where on the one hand, it's even in the name of the GAN, a generative network. But you're still working with kind of the real world with these data sets, which are kind of extremely kind of representative or trying to represent the world around. And so it's that tension between working with the two within my practice, something that I find really exciting.
Great, thanks. Stefan, maybe an answer from your side, from the curator side.
Yeah, so let me first of all say that with Michael, I'm not so sure if he is right in a historical respect or not. Thinking of Man Ray or a lot of modernist photographers, you already have a history, a tradition, a legacy of abstract photography. But I would assure that in the digital age we are living in, there is a need for non-reproductive photography, and maybe artistic photography is this special field to have a critical view on this reproductive issue of photography, a reproductive side of photography. And yeah, who else than artists could do practical research on this? But well, let me give the ball back to Michael or also Anne. I asked myself when I heard first of all from Darktaxa Project, why is it necessary for you to found a group? So you described the different positions, so individual. What is the link between all these positions, and is it really necessary to have a group, or what is the function of this group commitment between you?
Yes, I mean, first of all, it's fun to have a group. That's first of all, and of course, second of all, I mean, since let's say 2010, where all these questions about the digital and digital issues became so virulent, yes, I saw like all of my colleagues working for themselves against the discourse that was still kind of with representational photography, even if there were lots of photographers already working with the digital. So at a certain point I said, okay, we need to kind of give it a bit more power and get those people who were doing this work since 2006, some back to the 90s, give them a stronger voice, because before they were all alone in their fields. And what connects us is very surprising. It's not like we're not a collective with an aesthetical program. You're totally right in that. But we all share the same questions on a theoretical basis. So we're doing talks, we're meeting on Zoom, discussing, doing publications. but of course, you know, sometimes we're doing collective works, but everybody comes from their own positions. But all of us were engaging with these questions, or I say it again, maybe the crisis or the new situation or the change that the digital brought. And all of the artists that are in the group found solutions or artistic strategies that go way beyond what I say documentary photography. I mean, some of us come from documentary photography, so but that's way beyond what documentary photography can do, because documentary photography is bound to the surface, and the algorithm is beyond the surface. The algorithm is invisible. Yeah? So we need some strategies for that.
Thank you so much, Michael. And just when it starts to get interesting, we have to leave. Unfortunately, we're already 5 minutes over time. It's such a pity. But I thank you all for joining and getting this conversation started. Hopefully we'll continue elsewhere. I'm sure it will. And I also want to thank everybody who's just tuned in to listen to us. You know where to find us. Darktaxa Project has a wonderful site where you can find more information to all of the artists, and the Sprengel Museum in Hanover is always there until COVID does something to it. Hopefully not. All right. So thank you again, and I wish you a good morning in Vancouver, evening in Europe, and all the other time zones.